Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday Matinee. It's been a long, long time since we were last on the air, but we left you with episode 32, Loki, and now we're on episode 33, The Lord of the Rings 20th Anniversary. Wow, I can't believe that it has been 20 years since The Fellowship of the Ring first debuted in theaters. We were all just a bunch of little kids back then, basically.
Not
compared to
really a kid.
compared to now, we were all youngins. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about Lord of the Rings. But before we do that, I of course have to introduce the panel. Returning, of course, it wouldn't be a big grand return to the Sunday Matinee without basically my right hand, Sarah Moore. Welcome back, Sarah.
I'm very happy to be here.
And joining us for the first time, we have Bjorn Whitney. Bjorn,
Hello.
welcome.
Thank you.
Or
I'm excited.
Should I say, with that long, beautiful hair, Aragorn, son of Arathorn.
You know what? I'll take it. If there's one thing I can say, Vigo may be prettier than me and richer than me and more talented than me, but I can have awesome hair without a hair and makeup department to take care of it for me. So I have that one thing over him, and I'll take that to my grave.
Excellent. And also joining us for the first time, Miles McGillivray. Miles, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about Lord of the Rings. This is going to be awesome.
All right. So before we get on to news and whatnot, just want to address where the show's been. So yeah, we did Loki, and that was right around the time when we were all getting our vaccinations. We were all starting to think, hey, maybe we can get back into theater. And I did. I was very lucky to be able to do 2 shows last year before the winter holidays, and kind of just took over my life. And then I also quit my job, and I've been trying to put together a little something that actually works with my degree, so that I can be happy doing what I do with work, which is very important. So that's kind of where it's been. But you know, I couldn't have decided to bring this back at a better time. The Omicron variant, I don't know how it's messing with theater up where you all are at. Once again, we're all theater kids. But down here in the South Sound, we've had this week 3 big shows either flat out canceled or pushed to July. So the brief absence, hopefully as numbers go down, we'll be seeing theater come back a little bit in March, April. But the brief absence of theater means I once again have time to do stuff like this. I want to do this and theater at the same time. So trying to figure out that balance. But yeah, everyone, please get vaccinated.
Yes, please do. I work at a healthcare facility at a call center, and I got to say, it feels like we got to do a 3rd year of this. It's like, oh man, year 3, here we go. Let's get back to normal.
Yeah, I work at a school. We're pretty sick of it as well.
Yeah, I work at the children's hospital, so I'm very familiar with everything going on with it, working specifically with the nurses. They're very tired people.
Yes.
I used to work in an Amazon warehouse, and I was telling a friend earlier this week, I bet that if I was still there, we did a pretty good job handling the original and, Delta when it started up. I'm pretty sure at this point I would have caught it, because Omicron is a wacky, crazy, contagious little bit there.
Yeah, I know 4 people personally who've all come down with it.
I know at least 4 people, yeah.
Yeah, I've got about the same here. So it's time, people. If you're not vaccinated, please do. It also makes going to see movies safer. Yeah. And that's what we're here to talk about, is movies.
Also, it's free. So it's not like it's cost prohibitive. just get the needle in the arm. It doesn't hurt that bad. Come on.
Yep. My philosophy is just don't watch, and it's okay.
I've seen movies like that, but we're not talking about those today.
All right, let's get on to the actual news here. So decided to keep the news light this week, because you never know how long a Lord of the Rings thing can go on. So first off, this kind of goes along with stuff we talk about all the time of streaming services on this show. Netflix is raising the prices again for its streaming service. Let me see. I've got the numbers here. It's going up to $15.49 a month for the standard plan in the United States. The premium plan is going up to $19.99 a month. And I'm conflicted on this because on the one hand, in the last few months, Netflix has given us such wonderful things as Tick, Tick, Boom and Don't Look Up. On the other hand, one of the reasons they said they're doing this is so that they can keep doing new stuff. In regards to their television department, it's frustrating because it just feels like they cancel everything they make after a season, unless it's Stranger Things or The Witcher. So yeah, Sarah, we've talked about this so much. What are your thoughts on Netflix raising its prices again? It's now officially, by the way, the most expensive streaming service among the big ones.
I mean, I guess. I obviously, it sucks when prices raise, but I will still pay it because there's a lot of stuff I like on there. So they're putting out some really good stuff. So I guess they can get away with it. That's the capitalism, right?
I've always known
canceling things. Yeah.
I've always known that this decade, this 2010 to 2020 decade was like the best that we were going to have it. They were going to figure out a way. Somebody's got to pay the queen to star in The Crown. So there's a lot of stuff to do, a lot of expenses.
Yeah, I would love to be able to act like I'm going to go, oh no, if they raise it to a point, I am out. I'm not out. There's not a chance. Look, I'm upset that they canceled Cowboy Bebop. I liked the live action version a lot. It was fun. Is it the best thing I've seen on there? No, but there's just a certain amount of it being like it's convenient, and there are still a lot of series and movies I want to watch that are on there. So yeah, they own my soul. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. It's just frustrating that that they're almost pretty much at this point double the price of Disney Plus, and I can't get rid of Disney Plus for so many obvious reasons.
I feel like they also have a much bigger catalog. I mean, I love Disney Plus too, but they have a much bigger catalog of stuff than Disney Plus.
Yeah,
including R-rated content. So adult content.
please, every studio out there, please don't introduce 5 new streaming services this year. Okay. We're pretty good with the ones we have, I would say. I'm stuck with too many of them, and I don't even have Apple. And I want to watch stuff like Ted Lasso because I've heard that's amazing. It's like can't commit to everything. Speaking of Disney Plus, I just thought this was hilarious. One of the funniest things to happen is Tim Allen's coming back to play Santa Claus on Disney Plus. It's been well over a decade since the last Santa Claus film, and I'll be perfectly honest, I did not watch the 2 sequels. The first one was fine for me. Yeah, there were 2 sequels. Yeah.
There's one where it's like a robot. Like he plays a robot as well. See if the robot's back. I don't know.
Yeah, so I just thought that was kind of funny. Sarah, you'll love this one. Scream is back in theaters.
No, I wish I could go see it. Stupid Omicron.
And 75% on Rotten Tomatoes this weekend. That's pretty good for the 5th entry in a franchise that has been, since the first one, kind of up and down. So I hope you get a yeah.
They've been doing that. There's that 10-second, it looks like it's going to be a reaction video, but then the screen guy comes in to kill. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and it's a shame now that we're kind of deep into Omicron. One of the things I'm going to be doing if I go to see a movie at a theater anytime soon is Fandango lets you check some of the seats in advance. And if I'm going to go see a movie and it looks like there's only 3 other people there, I'm probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
If I'm going to go see another Friday evening showing of No Way Home, No Way Home, then I'm definitely checking and thinking, okay, maybe not if it's another packed theater, because that was the last big packed movie I saw.
No, same. When I saw No Way Home, I deliberately chose a showing that was sort of at an odd time. It was like a Sunday morning. And when I bought the tickets, which was not long before the show date itself, most of the theater was wide open, and it remained that way when I saw it. But yeah, it was a very odd time to get up and go see a blockbuster movie.
Yeah, it's not normal. Not at all. So yeah, if you're planning on going out to see a movie and you're worried about big crowds, check Fandango, check those seats. And if you're lucky, you'll also be in like a big auditorium that's empty. I live next to a theater that has like 5 tiny auditoriums. So every time I think, oh, this has all empty seats, and I'm like, oh, but 5 people fills it up. So be careful what you're doing out in public right now. All right. We were just talking a little bit of No Way Home. We got more Marvel stuff. And this is cool. I think this is just, I'm so excited for this. So the Moon Knight trailer is supposedly, well, not supposedly, it's dropping tomorrow night during the wild card game. And this weekend, it was revealed that the release date for Moon Knight might even be as early as March 30th, which would be awesome. By the time this episode drops, we'll probably know that. We're recording on Sunday. I'm probably going to drop this on Tuesday. Tomorrow is a holiday, and a holiday that I think we should not be dealing with discourse about film. So I'm going to hold off on dropping the episode till Tuesday. So we'll see. I've seen the Moon Knight trailer by the time this episode drops, and it's a shame we can't just talk about it right now because I'm so excited. Are there any other Moon Knight fans in here? Boom.
I love Moon Knight.
I'm an Oscar Isaac fan.
That too.
Oscar Isaac fans are also very welcome. Yeah. I've been waiting for the MCU to introduce a darker character since we kind of, but maybe didn't lose Daredevil. We'll see. Spoiler alerts. But yeah, Moon Knight. I'm really excited for Moon Knight, for Blade. Please give us Ghost Rider. Bring some of that darkness back into the MCU.
Oh, without question. When Moon Knight was even first talked about, I was thinking back to that first season of Daredevil, where I went, "Oh, this style of grittiness and street level hero gives me hope for what they can do and might do with those stories."
Exactly. So, and also, I did not think Moon Knight was going to be the first one released of their next batch of Disney Plus shows. I was certain it was going to be Ms. Marvel because they'd started production on that, like I think at the tail end of 2019. So I was sure, but I'm betting at this point that they're waiting on that one to release it closer to the theatrical release of the Marvels, since those two will more than likely tie in.
Sure.
So, we'll see. All right. Before we get on to our main topic, has anyone watched anything fun this weekend? Have any suggestions for our audience? I mean, Bjorn and I have obviously can attest. No Way Home is awesome. If you can go see it safely, see it.
That was awesome. Absolutely.
I wish I could go see it.
But we are not going to say anything about it yet. That's actually a future episode.
Okay.
So I have been catching up on Archer, finally. I'm finally on season 12, which is the last season so far. So that's been good. That's been good. I put that out for far too long. I think I had stopped on season like 10 with the season where they're in space. So I was really far behind. So it's been good to catch up on that. I watched Eternals last night on Disney Plus. First time I saw it since the movie theater. I still say it's quite good, even though it's not your typical Marvel fare. But I enjoy quite a bit. Sarah, have you been watching anything? Anything fun?
we have one episode left of the Wheel of Time series, which I've been struggling through the books, and I am so far enjoying the series more than the books because they move it along much speedier. The books are like very slow. Yeah, so I've been enjoying that, and it was a little while ago, but I have to throw out there in case anyone hasn't seen it. Midnight Mass on Netflix was the last show I think we watched before we started Wheel of Time. That is an amazing series. And then I've also been seeing a lot of Encanto on Disney Plus because my daughter's in love with it. But the first couple times you see it, it's actually a really, really cute, well done movie.
First couple times.
The first couple times you see it.
Yeah, I need to add Midnight Mass to my list, and somehow I haven't watched Encanto yet. I'll be sure to only watch it maybe once, so I don't go insane.
I don't think anyone but somebody, but I think you have to have a toddler to have been like. She wants to watch it every day, but it actually is a really, really well done movie. The music in it is really good. It has a really good story, actually deals with like generational trauma, which is pretty cool for a Disney movie. And I really like the use of like the magic realism in it. And there's a lot to enjoy in it for adults, I think, too. But yeah, you don't need to watch it every day.
We had that problem. My mom we used to watch one of our friends' kids, and we had that problem with Cars, which is not a terribly deep film. And I used to really enjoy the first Cars, and now it's really tough for me to watch just because billion times. Bjorn, have you been watching anything amazing of late?
Actually, yeah. The series I'm big on right now, there's not a whole lot of episodes of it. It is on Netflix. Dairy Girls. I am friggin' hooked. It's hilarious. It's this show about these schoolgirls in Ireland, and while a lot of it is really, really hilarious, it actually has some really serious moments where they just deal with the turmoil and strife in Ireland in the time that it's set. I will say the last episode of season 1, I won't spoil anything for everybody who hasn't watched it, has a really powerful moment at the end of the episode that just, it had me talking about that episode for hours after I had watched it. And then a movie I watched recently, it's not a new movie, but I had no idea it existed because I have actually been watching a lot of Columbo lately because I love Peter Falk. There is a movie called The Cheap Detective. It stars Peter Falk, and it's also got Madeline Kahn in it, where it is basically a spoof on every Humphrey Bogart detective movie that he did. And you can see some of the beats. You're like, oh my God, this is the Maltese Falcon. Oh, this is The Big Sleep. Oh, this is Casablanca. And it's farcical, but everything is performed just completely straight as a stick, just pure. Sarah's known me long enough to know that's just my kind of wheelhouse of humor, where I'm like, give me the absurd, but don't acknowledge any of the absurdity at all. I would say to anyone, The Cheap Detective, it's so good. And I love Peter Falk.
I have seen parts of that a long time ago, and yeah, what I saw I enjoyed quite a bit. So I think it was probably on like AMC back when they actually showed movies.
Yeah, I want to say I saw it on Amazon Prime.
Well, if it's on Prime, then I'm all set.
Yeah, a screenplay by Neil Simon.
Oh, well, there you go. All right, Miles, have you been watching anything awesome of late?
I did see Ted Lasso, and I really liked it. It had a lot of good character stuff, and I thought didn't take the cheap way out in a lot of things. And then I do just want to back up. Dairy Girls is hilarious.
Yes.
The end of the first episode is like one of the hardest times I've ever laughed. I won't spoil it, but watch the first episode and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All right.
So I remember to watch it.
It's amazing.
Yeah. We've got some good recommendations this week, but it's time to talk about The Lord of the Rings, something that's not so recent, and yet somehow it still kind of feels like yesterday that it was brand new. But let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to right before the first movie even came out, when, quote, they said it couldn't be done. No one thought this was a possibility. It had been attempted before by Ralph Bakshi in the 70s and his animated film that covers the first book and a pretty good chunk of the Two Towers, but wasn't successful at all and couldn't get a sequel. We've got the Rankin Bass films, and I love their adaptation of The Hobbit. I think that's a great little film they did. But their take on The Return of the King with really no other story to precede it felt a little awkward to just jump straight to the end of the trilogy. So yeah, it's just who could possibly have thought that this could be done in the 90s before CG, Jurassic Park notwithstanding, and a couple of the great movies. Like, who had the vision, who had the technology to bring this to life? And who would have thought that it ended up being that kooky guy from New Zealand who directed The Frighteners? Like, let's jump right into it. Like, what was it? Oh, before we jump into it, who read the books before they saw the movies?
I did.
All right.
I didn't know much. Yeah. I didn't know much about them.
I was going to say, I read the books between movie 1 and 2. If that counts.
Yeah. I got the books like 3 years before the movies. I had a family friend who was really into the Lord of the Rings, and she gave it to me, and I read them over the course of a couple years. But interestingly, I just thought of it like the nerdy books that the Led Zeppelin referenced, because Led Zeppelin has some songs where they pull out Ring Wraiths and Nazgul, and I think they name checked Gollum at one point. That's all I thought of it as. I actually wasn't like truly hooked by the books. And then when the movies came, I sort of then worked to understand them backwards from there.
I also read them about 3 years before the first movie came out, and I knew enough about them from seeing the animated films. But then I read through them again. I think it was in between The Two Towers and The Return of the King, so in 2003. And I think I read through them just at that point to be like, okay, what made it into the movies, what's still left out? And I really want to know before Return of the King, because I knew that movie was going to be stuffed, especially if you watch the extended edition. So yeah, Bjorn, did you ever read the books?
I have never actually read all of them. I've read Fellowship, but I actually have I have a bit of a retention issue with reading. It has to do with just partially how my eyes are messed up, and it'll mess up letters on the page. It's similar to dyslexia, but not that exactly. So when it gets into a lot of that, parts of those books read like the friggin' begats in the Bible, where it's just do. So I can't keep focus through it. So like, I've read The Hobbit multiple times, love it. But when you get too far into the minutia, I end up starting to miss some of it. And after I have to go back and reread a page a couple of times, I just go, I'm out. I made it through Fellowship, but it took me about a month and a half to get through it. And I will honestly say it was a little bit of a slog. And I went, I love these for what they are. I frigging love high fantasy. I mean, I've got a D&D background behind me right now. Like, I obviously love all that, and it's a huge part of who and what I am. But I attach to a visual medium so much better. So I love that they were made into these amazing films, because I got to appreciate a whole lot of stuff. But yeah, I've never made it through all three.
I will congratulate you because of I would say, again, it's been forever since I read them, but of the three, The Fellowship is probably the most dense.
That's what I've been told. People are like, oh, you just had to keep going. I'm like, man, I got stuff to do. I can't be slogging through two more.
The beginning of Fellowship is like, oh God, it goes hobbits. Like,
yep.
Yeah, I'm the one guy that wasn't upset that Tom Bombadil didn't make it in. Like it's.
I wasn't upset about that either.
No,
I wasn't.
No. It's like, come on, you talked a lot and then did nothing. I don't care.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too. So whatever your status is with when you read the books, when you saw the movies, that first time you saw Fellowship of the Ring, Miles, I want to start with you. Just what was it like? What was that feeling?
Well, I remember most impactfully the special effects. Like they did it. Seeing the orcs, I like the cave troll, the ring itself with the inscription on it. I remember being really like, whoa, it went in the fire and it talked, like all that stuff. I really liked all that. And then I was also just, how did they make all the hobbits actually small? So I was most impressed at first by the visual, and then just really happy and happy with all of the Fellowship stuff, but then really frustrated with the ending because I was like, wait, we have to wait 2 years. That was hard. They're going down the river. Can we keep going with them?
Bjorn, what was your first big reaction to seeing the Fellowship?
So my first reaction slightly predates seeing the film, because the thing I distinctly remember, I don't remember what movie my friends and I were going to see, but I remember the first trailer when it came out, and it's showing all this landscape. And I remember us joking to ourselves, oh, what are they doing? Is this like Lord of the Rings or something? And then it was, and we saw the dates of when it all was coming out. And like Miles, like you said, the fact it was like a year and a half between the first and second film, and thankfully only a year between the other two. But that was also one of the first times I ever saw something with we have this planned out series of release dates. And so it felt epic before it began. And so, because I loved The Hobbit so much, it was when I saw Bag End that I was just in. I mean, the whole intro was great, and I love that. But seeing Bilbo's door, and I knew of Frodo Baggins, I knew who he was, because I had a friend when I was little who was super into Lord of the Rings, talked about it a bunch, so I knew it by adjacency. But seeing that, I was just instantly hooked. And then you talk about the effects. For me, it was even more the casting, where I was so hooked, because I didn't know who a lot of these people were. I had no idea who Viggo Mortensen was. I had certainly never heard of Orlando Bloom. So they were these characters more than they were other things to me. So everything just felt alive.
I love that you bring up that one of those early trailers that announced the release dates for all three, because that is huge. And that they managed to stick the dates for all three and not have to delay was incredible. Before the pandemic, we've gotten used to at this point Marvel saying, here's our schedule for the next 5 films, and typically sticking the date. It's a thing we just do now, but back then it was there's no way they stick the release date for all 3 of these. How they even, it's they filmed them back to back to back.
Yeah,
that's how they did it.
I completely missed that as a child. I thought, God, I hope everyone goes see this movie to make sure they make a second one. I entirely missed that. Somebody get a camera following those hobbits down that river now. Didn't see the release.
Sarah, what was your experience like?
I didn't know anything about it going in. I don't think I even saw a trailer. I think we had The Hobbit read to us in class when I was in elementary school, but I didn't know anything about Lord of the Rings. I went to go see a late night showing of it with my theater friends at Skagit Valley College, and they were telling me about it because a few of them were really into it, and I was like, oh, okay, sounds cool, I'll go see it. I like fantasy stuff. And I remember about probably 30 minutes into the movie really having to pee, but I literally could not leave because I was so riveted to what was going on the screen. How did I miss this? How did I not know about this story? Anyway, yeah, and then I immediately the next day went out and bought the books and read them, probably within a couple of months, because I just I couldn't wait to know what happened. I just remember just being wow, how did I never know about this story? It was just literally the most exciting thing I'd seen on screen that I think at that point that I could think of.
I like to think of it as and again, we're not young anymore, but we are all too young to have experienced the original Star Wars trilogy as they were released in theaters. This was our Star Wars. I say that even though knowing in 1997, we all had the chance to go see Star Wars in the theater, albeit with a few little tweaks. But this was our big thing. You know, it was 2 years after the Phantom Menace when some of us probably thought we're about to get our big thing, and we're then severely let down. And to have Lord of the Rings kind of overlap Star Wars at this time, because Attack of the Clones came out in between Two Towers and Return of the King. No, it came out between Fellowship and Two Towers. And it was funny just to see Star Wars kind of going on this downward slope. But it was okay because all we had to do was wait for December, and then we could watch Lord of the Rings again. So the nerds were having a good time. We're having a good time. Yeah, I didn't see it opening night. You know, I was still too young to care about doing that opening night kind of thing. And this was still back in the day when, you know, the internet wasn't new, but it wasn't at that point where it was like, well, I have to go see a movie opening night. Otherwise, it's going to get spoiled, you know, on the internet. You know, stay off Twitter, blah, blah, blah. We weren't there yet. So there wasn't necessarily this rush, but I do remember seeing it, you know, fairly soon after opening. But it was hilarious because we went with my family and there ended up being 9 of us. And it was just, that was perfect. It's like, yeah, you go see this movie with 9. That's how this works.
And also, like you talk about opening night stuff, that was when, if you wanted to go see something opening night, you went there and you got in line early and you sat and you waited in line to buy your ticket for the show you were at to go in. You didn't buy stuff in advance, at least not where I grew up. So
you did.
You stood outside in the cold, unless it was a warm month, for hours to get in. Because if you wanted a good seat, you had to be near the front of that line.
Yeah, and I don't even think we bought our tickets in advance for the show we went to. We were just, I think, a week in. I think a week in, we were still good. The internet has really ruined it all.
I will hard disagree and say the internet has improved it because I like selecting my seats well in advance, so I know where I'm sitting. I paid my dues, man. I'm not waiting in line anymore.
That's true. I just mean it's. I just miss the days when you could like casually go to a movie, buy a ticket right there.
Yeah, and then
take any seat you wanted. One. Yeah, or do that. Yeah.
I definitely miss the days where things didn't get spoiled on the internet.
Yeah. And I mean, because there were still a lot of people back then who hadn't read the books, and like that would have been a huge spoiler. Like, oh, Gandalf dies? No, that'd have been a huge thing. And yeah, I got to say, the special effects back then, and today, even today, was like, holy cow, they did this. And they made all these actors, they made Elijah Wood tiny. How could they possibly do that? And yeah, same thing with casting. Like, I knew Ian McKellen was from X-Men. I knew who Elijah Wood was because who didn't? But then it was like, wait, John Rhys Davies from Indiana Jones?
Yeah.
And yeah, like getting introduced to Orlando Bloom, and then it was like, and finally getting to see Hugo Weaving in a not Matrix film was really cool. And getting to tell my mom Hugo Weaving's good because she would never watch The Matrix. All that was just so wonderful. And I think by the time the Two Towers had come out, I was ready. Like, okay, we need to see this like opening day, midnight if we can. So yeah, that's December 2001. And you know what? Like, as I think all the young people in this country needed something like Lord of the Rings at that time. We were all still reeling from the 9/11 attacks and just dealing with a president who just didn't get it. And as young folks, I think we needed that escape. And what better way to escape Earth than to go to Middle Earth? and to realize that, holy crap, there's a place on this planet that still looks this beautiful. We live in Washington, and Washington's a beautiful state, but holy crap, New Zealand is so cool that there's just that much land untouched by technology. Like, we've got some beautiful forests here, but you can't drive 50 miles without seeing, some gigantic monstrosity of a building.
Yeah.
Yeah, any long pan is going to have some chevron in there somewhere eventually. It's the middle of Darrington, but it's there, or some strip of logged area. It's kind of interesting you bring up like that we wanted to escape, Ben, because fantasy is the best way to do that. And it's kind of where this whole trilogy came from as well. It's a way to deal with the corruption of power and people's tendencies towards good and evil. It's kind of a way to talk about that with World War I and World War II without really talking about it and, placing the Shire and Mordor. So it's kind of interesting. This is a way we can kind of suss out those things in this fantasy world.
Yeah, it's welcome in like it not having the shades of gray to worry about. Sometimes you do want your clear delineation of who you're rooting for, who you're rooting against, and it hit on all those important touchstones where, like you just said, being born out of a place in the real world. So I think we could feel that relation to it, but also have the comfort of knowing, okay, I'm with these people. This is my crew. I know who I'm going to be on the side of. And there was a comfort to that.
And you know what? There are a handful, not too many, but there are a few wonderful characters that have those shades of gray. I think of Boromir and Denethor are probably the two biggest ones, where it's particularly Boromir, because by the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, you still feel for the guy. He did some terrible stuff, but he did it for all the right reasons and realized that he made a huge mistake. Denethor's a little bit meaner than he is in the books, as I recall.
Yeah, he's not that bad in the books, but
I think they needed a human character in Return of the King that audiences could look at and boo, because it's hard to of course we're going to boo Sauron, but Sauron literally doesn't do anything. He just sits there on top of his tower staring at stuff. So we needed someone to boo.
Yeah, well, Boromir as well. I mean, he gets shot in the back in the books. So his whole redemptive arc, which is one of the best parts of the Fellowship of the Ring, where he is getting the 3 arrows and fighting for the hobbits, that was inspiring. That was an absolutely great climax after the already climax of the bridge.
Absolutely. I mean, we're already well into the next section here. Favorite moments, characters, and performances. Like, shout out to Sean Bean for delivering that nuanced performance, and shout out to the extended editions for giving him a chance to come back in the next 2 films and getting to sort of build on the relationship with Faramir that we, otherwise only get to hear about in the theatrical cut.
I'd call the extended editions justice for Boromir, because you got to see where he was coming from a bit more, why he had that stance of, we're going to use this ring as a weapon, because dude was on the front line right against Mordor. He had seen some stuff, and I liked the extended editions. I friggin' loved, because it went into that so much more. So it didn't just seem like, oh, he's weak and he's corrupted by this. Like, no, he was instructed to do this, and it's hard to argue completely against the reason for it, considering where he's from.
One of my favorite moments, and just changing topics just a little bit, one of my favorite moments, and this kind of delves into the music a little bit, is when they're in Lothlorien and Boromir is describing to Aragorn Minas Tirith, the White Tower of Ecthelion. I think it's just a beautiful moment, and in a movie with a bunch of big moments, there's a lot of wonderful little moments, but just between 1 or 2, 2 or 3 characters that just really flesh it out for me.
That has the great speech, which is one of the best speeches, which is that I wish the ring never came to me. And Gandalf says, so do all who live to see such times. That is really famous, but the performance on that, we can't go like too much longer without talking about Sir Ian McKellen and his absolute carrying of already a stacked cast. I mean, he is fantastic. He brings something to it that is ethereal. I mean, it is one of the best performances ever.
Absolutely.
Such an iconic character like that. You could see where it would be easy for a lesser performer to be too big in too many moments. But while it's been memed a million times, we've seen the clip a million times. The big "you shall not pass." I love that moment for Gandalf so much, not just because he's making a stand against this Balrog, but up until that, we've seen so much subtlety in his acting. Very, very little big moments. His pained reaction when Frodo says, "I'll take the ring." Like you see the concern. He's like, this dude doesn't know what he's signing up for. And so all those little subtleties to when we get this huge, massive shout on the center of that bridge, I think is part of what made that moment so iconic. It's not just, oh, he's incredible. It's not just the effects. Like, no, we've seen Gandalf be so subtle so many times where now he's letting things go.
That's also probably my favorite big moment from the first film, and possibly across all three films. I love monsters, so
yeah,
how they were able to create the Balrog was like, this is like nothing I've ever seen on film before. Like, this creature literally is somehow, it's fire. It was just incredible.
One of the lasting images.
Go ahead, Miles.
Sorry, Ben. One of the lasting images is the beginning of Two Towers when they're fighting and they're falling down there.
Oh,
and
man.
It zooms out to the ocean, and then you see the fiery, fight down the thing. I mean, that is seared into my brain. I mean, that was so cool to see in the theaters.
Well, I think we definitely got to throw Viggo Mortensen out there too, especially considering that he came into it late. Yeah. They had originally cast Stuart Townsend, and I think they were 90s into filming, and then he was like, "Oh, this guy's too young. We need an older Aragorn." So knowing that he came, I mean, I cannot imagine anybody else playing that role. I feel like he carried so much of those movies. Yeah.
I don't think any one actor carries those movies. It's just, I don't think there's any one character I think is poorly cast.
And I think it's
maybe Arwen.
I mean, yeah, but the fact,
a huge fan of Liv Tyler in that movie, but
the fact that after those films were done, so many of the cast members got matching tattoos and all of that, all the stories that you heard coming out of what they did afterwards and ways that they stayed in contact. To me, this wasn't just these three movies, this trilogy that fans enjoyed. The people involved seemed like it meant something to them. The story of Christopher Lee saying to Ian McKellen that Lee had always imagined he would play Gandalf if this movie was made, and basically McKellen's like, oh my, okay, and the idea that Sir Ian would be intimidated or by any other performer. I guess it would take somebody of Christopher Lee's stature to do that, but again, it's one of those little stories and moments that I love from it, and knowing that everyone took their work incredibly seriously.
Speaking of, I don't remember quite how this story goes, but it's something about how when Christopher Lee got the call, he was hoping, it's like, I got Gandalf, right? And Peter was like, no, but here's the thing. And again, perfect. Christopher Lee every now and then gets to play a really fun hero, but he's such a good villain.
Oh, he really is.
And I also love the story of him talking about his wartime experience with Peter Jackson, that this is not how it feels. This is what it feels like to get stabbed in the back.
Yeah, it's like,
and I know because I did it.
Yeah, when he's like, no, that's not the sound somebody makes when they're stabbed in the back. How do you know? Because that's not the sound somebody made when I stabbed them in the back.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh yes, that's right. We actually have someone in this cast who fought in World War II. And who read the books once a year, every year.
And who met Tolkien.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Tolkien himself was a combat veteran. He was in the Battle of the Somme in World War I, where a bunch of people, where like millions of people died, and we don't even really know what the battle was about. Still to this day, we don't really know what the advantage was or who won, and just a bunch of people died. That you can kind of see where this all comes from. After that, we're kind of going in order from like Fellowship to the beginning of Two Towers. I would love to talk about the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Oh, you mean
because
the greatest battle ever?
Yeah, the scale of it.
The Battle of Pelennor Fields is crazy. It's huge, but if I was to pick one big battle across all three, it's Helm's Deep.
I mean, there are so many little elements of Norse mythology that creep into the Lord of the Rings. And that's part of why I love the Battle of Helm's Deep so much in the film, because we see Gimli go up there and he blows that massive horn. And all I could think was the story of Ragnarok and thinking of Heimdall blowing the Gjallar horn. And my blood ran cold seeing it in the theater. Like, I remember distinctly, and all I could think was, none of our heroes are safe. Any of them, and that's me coming from this knowledge of Norse mythology background. But I remember as they kept falling back and kept falling back and kept falling back, even I had a moment of going, are they all going to die here? What's going to happen? And Gandalf shows up in that last moment. But I don't know that I've ever seen a better build of tension in a battle, period. Like, it's a cheesy phrase, but I'm gonna say it anyways because I was on the edge of my damn seat. Just
yes, the nuanced tension, the shots of the kids, but then you mix that with the fact that they caught the whole scale of the battle. I mean, 10,000 Uruk-hai. You see 10,000 Uruk-hai out there. When they blow up the drainage thing, and it shows the cement like come down and hit, and that was just mind blowing to see in theaters. So we have these two, this nuanced, what are we fighting for? Our future, our little children, and these people who are trying to hold on to arrows. And then also we're getting to see this grand battle. That is a crazy line to walk, and they pulled it off. It's amazing.
And then even mixing in a couple little bits of comedy, because that's the battle where we have Gimli say, "You have to toss me, don't tell the elf." But we also see Gimli and Legolas having their kill count competition in that. Mm-hmm. So somehow writing that perfect line where you also and here are some moments that you can laugh. Like, what a ride.
Absolutely. And let's talk for just a second about how much work went into outfitting all of those extras, those orcs, those soldiers. Weta Workshop did an incredible job.
They're amazing.
Just creating all that armor and all that weaponry. It's mind-blowing. Like, these days, the weapons at least would probably be CG.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk a little bit about The Hobbit later on, but one of the things I love so much more about The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit is, sure, there's the occasional CG orc and whatnot every now and then, but you got to do that. But you get so many close-up shots of just of these people decked out in full makeup and real armor. It's insane. No one would do that anymore. They've got to be so happy with Star Wars that they have lightsabers.
I remember too, watching the appendices and seeing all the little details they put and on the weapons, on the costumes. It reminds me of when you go to cathedrals in Europe and there's all the details that are for God's eyes or whatever. So much of that never even showed on screen, but they put that all in there because they cared and they were passionate about it. And it was like there for them. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah, Helm's deep. Good call on that. I just rewatched the trilogy before we did this. I watched it for the first time in 4K, and I posted this on Facebook because it was just so incredible. Gandalf charging down the hill with the Rohirrim as the sun comes up. It was literally the most beautiful shot in the entire trilogy to watch, in that resolution. It was stunning.
What a job, too, for them to have that be the climax of the movie, because the second movie, like trying to find where the climax would be out of the books, is really impressive. And that's like a perfect one, because he says, look to the east at 5:05 a.m. There's also another improvement on the books, which is that the speech that Sam is saying at the end, where he's saying that there's some good in this world that's worth fighting for. Like, that's not in the books. And it's one of the best, most memorable lines in the whole trilogy. I mean, it's amazing. It sums it all up.
Shout out to Sean Astin for just being amazing.
Yes.
Yep.
One of the things I love about the movies and the books is I love how, and now we're getting into Return of the King a little bit here. By the time you get to the end, you start to realize, oh my God, is Sam actually really the hero of this story?
Totally agree.
And just that moment, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. That is, I think that is something that we as a society need to be practicing for each other. Is none of us can carry another person's problems, but I'm here. I'm here to walk with you.
Yeah, Sam, I would say, is the hero.
Yeah,
of
the one who couldn't be broken, couldn't be corrupted, because he had no reason to want it. There was nothing to want there. He just wanted his friend to be okay and to not have to carry it anymore.
Yeah, because the ring does corrupt Frodo. I mean, the ring wins, and
I was horrified. Like I knew a little bit about the bit with Gollum at the very end and Frodo losing his finger, all that. But I just thought, I was mad, like, oh, they must like wrestle over it. That's when Gollum makes his move. When Frodo turned and said no, like my just jaw friggin' dropped. I had no idea that was going to happen. And for those of us who hadn't read the books, like that moment in the theater, I can tell you could tell who else hadn't read the books, because there were collective gasps around me. We're like, wait, he lost?
Yeah. Well, in the books too, Frodo doesn't actually like even fight for it. Gollum just dances. Yeah. Yay, I won. And then he falls off like by a happenstance, which is like such a weird thing. It's like the ring always wins. The ring always corrupts. But what it couldn't predict was that these two creatures, these hobbits, would not kill this enemy that is trailing them, Gollum. And the mercy that they showed Gollum ends up being the thing that saves the ring. And that has always clicked with me, and it's kind of the main hooking point for me in the whole series. Main storyline.
That's actually one part I think is better in the books. I like the way it happens in the book. That, like when I was reading, it made me like laugh out loud, because I'm like, all this, and he takes it and he falls off because he's so excited that he got the ring back. Like, it was hilarious. And I actually like how it happened in the book a little better than the movie. It's one of the few parts.
Yeah, well, then they go back in the book. They go back and the Shire is burned down. So it's way better in the movie that Frodo fights for it, and that they go back into the green. It is like one of the major improvements for sure.
One thing I do miss about Sam in the book, and they didn't really need to add this, but there is that moment in the books where he picks up the ring, and for a second he's like, I could do something with this, but then he literally was just like, no, that's stupid. I need to get it back to Frodo. What was I thinking? Like, his temptation is just like, it's literally nothing.
It's can't cook with so it. Funny. I can't eat it. I don't need it.
Actually, that actually poses interesting questions like what can you really do with the ring? Because I was watching it recently, I thought, man, if Sauron had just used the ring to turn invisible, he probably wouldn't have been killed at the end of the first battle. Like, what does the ring do different things to different classes of characters?
I think the ring, I mean, it's ultimately created to fit Sauron. You know, his malice is poured into it. I think the main thing it does is control the other people that have the other rings.
I thought exactly. It's like it's a whole puppet master kind of thing, because okay, it in itself doesn't have a whole lot of power, but if you could control these 9 other kings, you're controlling 9 kingdoms. You think about how much land, how much territory, how much power that is. You're causing so much to bend to your will. And then, like you were talking about, Miles, going all the way back to Tolkien's experiences and like World War I, between World War I, World War II, the idea of this, you know, evil leader and how far their reach could be into so many areas, like their notions of taking over the world as we know it there.
Yeah.
I mean, the turning invisible seemed to come in handy, so I guess that was a
that is true.
Invisibility is always very handy.
Except it seems like you're invisible to everyone but Sauron. Because he's like, oh, there you are. I got you.
Would have been kind of funny if it was like the ring could be like, you get to choose. Invisible, like the famous question we always get asked, like, would you be invisible or would you fly? And Frodo's like, well, I'll fly. Just flies to Mordor. But then we wouldn't have a story. It's the same question as, why don't they just have the eagles fly them?
They don't have the eagles fly them because the Nazgul would rip them apart. That's my take. Also, the eagles are sentient beings. They would also be corrupted by the ring. Anyway, we don't need to talk about that.
My reasoning on that was always because they don't know who these eagles are or where they are to do this. Like, what does a Hobbit know about the eagles?
Yeah, exactly. And the eagles, they also don't want to drop everything and fight Mordor, just like Rohan and Gondor don't.
Yeah.
Well, and they point this out too very subtly in the films, but like the war isn't just in Rohan and Gondor. Like I think someone says to Gimli, like, your people are fighting, you know, this war elsewhere too, because the orcs are everywhere.
Yeah.
I want to talk about a sort of favorite moment here that really has nothing to do with the story, but again, kind of harkens back to the age we were living in at the time. So when this first came out on DVD in 2002, DVD was still fairly new. You know, so we were all either scrambling to update our libraries from VHS, or in the case of this film, it was one of the first like brand new DVDs that a lot of us probably had. And boy, oh boy, back in the day, one of the best things to do with the Fellowship of the Ring was just put it on and then turn repeat on and just keep it going all day long. Just have it be the background noise of your life. I think that's one of the first movies that we ever did that in this house with. Because, we couldn't get enough of it.
I love that.
And similarly, like when the extended edition came out, I had a group of friends. We got together every Friday night. We would watch one new movie, and then we would just watch Fellowship of the Ring again. And we did that every week. We never got tired of it. It was just so good.
Well, I'd say these were the movies that changed the game for home releases and extended versions of stuff. I remember buying director's cuts or whatever of different movies, but these specifically had hey, this is when the theatrical version's coming out, but then we're releasing this extended edition. And, you know, the extended edition of Fellowship came out, people geeked out, I got it. But then I remember when Two Towers and Return of the King came out, that's when people were like, no. I'm waiting for the extended edition. When's that come out? I want that, because it came out after. Like, they weren't released at the same time. And now you see all these, you know, extended things. It's very common to have so much added on to every DVD or now Blu-ray release, where, I mean, prior to Lord of the Rings, there was hardly anything additional on there. You maybe got one or two deleted scenes, but that was, that was run of the mill for all of it. And now it's like, oh no, all this extended release stuff. And you don't generally see extended release films so much, but you have more and more special features now. Whereas I want to say I heard that part of the even existence of the extended release films was like Jackson made some just agreements with the studio of like, okay, well, I'll cut the runtime of the movie to be so long, but when I do the extended release, I'm putting all that crap back in, because I want to say, I think it was the theatrical release of Return of the King. I think they were like, no, it can't be longer than X. And he's going, well, don't you worry, because that extended comes out, it's going to be 4 hours long, baby.
And how could the studios say no when there are so many suckers out there who are going to buy both versions anyways?
I certainly did.
Yep. Speaking of, and another thing that we've kind of grown accustomed to nowadays, particularly with superhero movies, is the mid-credits or post-credits stinger. That was the thing back in the day, but New Line pulled a real clever trick to get people to come back to see Fellowship of the Ring. I don't remember if they did this with the Two Towers, but Fellowship of the Ring was either in theaters long enough, or they brought it back in like April, May of 2002 and said, if you stay through the credits, you get to see a sneak peek of the Two Towers.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I had to go. Like, again, this is before YouTube. This is before all these trailers would get on the internet leaked early. Again, the internet, a blessing and a curse.
And you wonder why Netflix is raising their prices. It's because we keep buying everything and doing all these things.
So before Marvel and DC came along and said, let's standardize all these mid-credits and post-credit stuff, like, no one had really thought to do that. It's like, that's brilliant marketing right there. It's like, of course we all want to see a little bit of what's coming next. Like Miles said, I want to keep going on the river. So, and you're all not alone in the whole, this is it. Because I actually did have that moment with someone in a movie theater, like the third or fourth time I saw it, like in February or March after it came out. There literally was a guy in the movie theater, and the theater was pretty empty at that point. So you could hear him literally yelling, "That's it?" It's like, oh man, you don't know what you're in for. Yeah, brilliant stuff. Like,
and going back to, and I don't know why this never occurred to me, kind of what we're talking about it now, when I mentioned like, oh, and they talked about this whole release schedule, and like you said, Ben, we're used to that now. I think that was actually really important to them, because when you think about, like you're saying, Miles, no, I want to go down the river with them, because I was like, sure, when Fellowship of the Ring ends, that's not much of an ending for a movie, because clearly the story is not over. There's a long way to go. So like, I don't know that it would have received the same fanfare by the casual viewer. That people don't know what all this is, unless people knew, no, there's two more parts, don't worry, you'll see them go down the river, but we'll catch up with them. You're just gonna have to wait until we have a boat for you too.
Yeah, because Star Wars is the main trilogy before this, and it ends very isolated. It could have just been one movie, and Indiana Jones as well could have just been like, it doesn't leave, there's no cliffhanger movie ending,
right?
Big one that I can think of.
And yeah, you're right, Bjorn. Fellowship's ending is kind of like a what? Two Towers does have a much more significant climax. And I'm trying to think though, like, Miles, maybe you remember, where do they end in the books with the Fellowship? Because I know they go maybe a chapter into the Two Towers, right?
Yeah, well, they're following like two different lines, so I feel like they don't end with the breaking of the Fellowship. It goes a little bit past that. Everything is all off. I mean, Shelob's in the second book. It's like hard to even. You read everything about Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas in the beginning of the second book, and then you go to Frodo and Sam like after their stuff ends. So it's like really hard. I don't know. The timeline is all messed up.
Yeah.
It's actually like 6 books. It's 3 books, but it's 6 books. And the first one is like book 1 and 2. And then in Towers, 2 Towers, like book 3 is Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas. And then book 4 is the whole Frodo and Sam. And then I think in book 5 in Return of the King, they go back to Aragorn. And
tells you that Frodo is dead, show up the Ethereal thing. You don't know yet that Frodo's not dead.
Yeah, because Shelob happens at the end of the 2 Towers, the spider, and he is left dead. At the end. Yeah.
So you actually believe it. That's the difference. That's a big difference.
But obviously, there's no way they could have done it that way in the movies and gotten away with it. It would have been, you literally would have had to have made it, you know, you probably could have had Fellowship as still as one movie, but you would have had to have broken up the 2 Towers and Return of the King into 2 movies apiece to do it that way. And that would have been too much.
As a consumer of the books, I demand that it be done exactly that way. I'm kidding.
Get on it, Pete
well,
Jackson.
Also, the whole like part 6 is all what happens after they defeat Sauron. So in Return of the King, the book, defeating Sauron happens in book 5, and then book 6 is like what happens to everybody after Sauron's defeated. So that would have been a weird like last movie.
I love how in the books, like Frodo and Sam crossing Mordor is really only like 2 chapters, and in the movie it's like, this is so much.
Yeah, they were really smart to focus specifically on that through line. And one thing I know that they did is they engaged the nerds like early from the very beginning, writing the script that was not necessarily normal at the time for the movie industry to be, because the thought in the 90s was the nerds are going to come see it anyway. We need to convert this movie for the casual people. Whereas Lord of the Rings was like, let's talk to the nerds and make sure this is going to go over well. You know, the onering.net and all that stuff. They were really, honestly, getting the feedback from us nerds. I mean, I was like 13 at the time. I was not involved, but in spirit, I was.
I think it was, I think it was Miramax that Jackson took it to first, and I think it was Miramax said we'll do it in 2 films, and it was like no, it has to be 3.
3 giant books. Why would they ever think that?
Yeah. Imagine 2 probably about 4.5-hour films. I mean, I'd watch them, but
I don't think they would have given them 4.5 hours. It probably would have been like 2 2-hour movies.
It's Miramax. It's been 90 minutes apiece.
We would have lost Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli. I bet in that case it would have just been Frodo and Sam, probably.
Oof, we can't have that.
They'd have been played by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon.
Miles, you actually touched on this not just a minute ago. I want to talk about how the Lord of the Rings is different from other film trilogies, because really you hit the nail on the head there. At the time, the only other big film trilogy that we had was Star Wars, and Star Wars is literally broken down into episodes. Last year, I did a whole episode on the Cornetto trilogy and how it's a different trilogy from everything else. And I think the Lord of the Rings is just the exact polar opposite of Cornetto. Cornetto is 3 standalone stories that thematically weave together perfectly. Lord of the Rings, unlike Star Wars, unlike Cornetto, I have to start at 1 and go through 3. You know, I can't start. I don't want to start with Return of the King. That just feels weird. You know, it just feels like you have to watch it as a whole. Unlike Star Wars, where on a snowy day I might watch Empire.
Yeah.
Well, totally agree.
And no one else has done that since, except The Hobbit. Again, The Hobbit.
Which did not need to be a trilogy.
Yeah. Well, I think it's you kind of have to have two parts to do this. You have to have the original source material be that good and that broken up. And then you have to have like a genius interpreter to interpret it that way. You kind of had to strike lightning twice to do this.
I do appreciate though that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it's. I mean, there are the books are were published in 3 parts, and the movie came out in 3 parts. But I don't know that Tolkien really thought of it as a trilogy. I mean, I feel like he thought of it as one story.
Yeah, I think he did just want it to be a
yeah. So it's really like a story that got broken into 3 parts, which is definitely a different kind of trilogy from like Star Wars, where it was a movie that he wanted to have more parts to, but when it was popular, okay, now we can make like 2 sequels.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that each film has a prologue that does sort of make each one stand out as this is this film. Obviously, you have all the setup in Fellowship of the Ring. You tell all the backstory. In Two Towers, I think they integrate the prologue brilliantly as this might be Frodo's dream, but it happened anyway, so we're cool. And then what a great place to throw in the story of Smeagol and Deagle at the beginning of Return of the King, right after you've been introduced to this character in Two Towers, and partway through Towers you think, we haven't even talked about Andy's Circus yet. Like how he just makes Gollum such a beautiful character that you empathize with, and at points you think, I do want Gollum to live through this because there is a good side to him. But then you see the beginning of Return of the King, and it is kind of like, you know what? There was evil there to begin with.
Yeah,
it wasn't just the ring that pulled him all the way, because if it was just the ring the whole time, Frodo probably could have killed Sam.
Yeah, one of the lines when we watched it, my wife and I watched it this between Christmas and New Year's. One of the lines I noticed that really drives that home, Ben, is when they're on Mount Doom and Frodo says, "You promised," he says, "Smeagol lied." Not Gollum. He takes full credit for being Smeagol and having done the lying, which is an interesting touch right on the stairs of Mount Doom there.
Yeah, let's talk about Andy's Circus here, because one of the moments I think we all remember from the Two Towers is Smeagol and Gollum. Their back and forth conversation is just it's funny, it's touching, and it's horrifying all at the same time.
Yeah, Circus changed the game for mocap performance and voicing and all. I had never seen a character represented like that, like we got to see with Smeagol, Gollum, the way we experienced them all throughout Two Towers and King, where they were so prevalent. That was just an unparalleled kind of performance, where anytime if the idea of a character was to be like fully CG, you expected to be there something kind of cheesy about it, because that's like and granted, I realize this film's very dated, but the idea of a fully CG character, my mind would instantly go to something like the Lawnmower Man, and that wasn't. You look at timeline. That was, what was that, mid-90s that came out? Yeah. So in only a handful of years, you look at where we go from there to what you had in Towers.
Well, and in between that, we also had, even though at the time in 1999, the special effects were great, Jar Jar Binks, I think, left us all thinking CG characters are a joke.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Not a great look.
So to turn around and give us a perfect Gollum, it really paved the way. And, Andy Serkis, of course, has done incredible work since the Planet of the Apes films.
Oh
His
man.
work as Caesar is incredible. And just, yeah, mocap in general has gotten to be so much better. And there really does need to be at some point, like now, we'll just say now, an Academy Award for mocap performances, because it's a completely different practice than just, I'm going to say any kind of acting is regular, but you're just your standard performance in front of a camera.
Oh, it definitely doesn't get the cred it deserves, because you see some behind the scenes stuff of so many films with a certain amount of CG where you're like, okay, this person's just acting to a tennis ball on a stick or all of this. You're like, this dude is in a completely green room wearing a suit with balls all over it while they move around and perform this character. Like, they're fully separate from a lot of what they're doing sometimes, just so they can fully encapsulate their entire performance. Like,
and I think we're all a little biased here because motion capture is not terribly dissimilar to what we do on stage. They just have a lot of technology, whereas we only have our imaginations.
Yeah.
So yeah, you heard it here, Academy, and you've probably heard it everywhere else. Get mocap its own category.
You heard it here first. The only thing different between Andy Serkis and Ben is a budget.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you, Academy, for listening all the way through as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I will. I look forward to your check. I assume it's in the mail.
Awesome. We've talked a lot about performances, about special effects. Howard Shore's score was, it's on par. I would say all over. It may not be as iconic, but I would say it's more epic than Star Wars.
I completely agree.
I've listened to it a lot more than almost any other score.
I probably still put Star Wars above in terms of iconic, but I have a ton of appreciation for Howard Shore's music going in the intervening 20 years as I've gotten older, realizing what they pulled off here. I mean, he is an absolutely incredible for a long time, like 12 and a half hours. Or what is it, 14 and a half hours?
It's a lot of hours.
Yeah,
but
it's epic on every level. It fit those films, but it still sort of had this like timeless feeling. Like I think of big fantasy movies, or even your more medieval like period pieces. It's got moments that make me think of the Adventures of Robin Hood. It's got moments that kind of make me think of the Duel in the Cliffs of Insanity and The Princess Bride. Bits where like I'm emotionally drawn into movies like Willow, like, and then yet it was above and beyond more than all of that. It was its own piece. As far as like overall epicness, I would put it up there with something like Mancini for just here's someone whose creations I would compare it to, because I agree with you, Miles. John Williams, I would say more iconic, because I hear those songs and I think of those scenes that they're from in Star Wars. I'm in the cantina. Oh, I'm on the Death Star. Whereas you hear the music from Lord of the Rings and you're just drawn into a whole different world and you're there. It's less specified.
I have some examples.
Go ahead,
Ben. Oh, I have some examples I brought down. I have guitars behind me, so I'm gonna make sure that I talk about the music so that people don't think, who's this imposter? Well, first of all, the Lord of the Rings' Force theme is the Shire, the do, and that's the one. But there's a couple really cool things that I tried to write down as I was preparing for this. The Isengard theme is super cool. The 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 bum bum and it's this weird like 5/4 time. And then they also have like that part on the stairs. Was that the right before the You Shall Not Pass, where they're doing that It's just like actually these Polynesian football players that are doing as the bell rock approaches, they're doing it's really cool. There's so many like interesting uses of like wood and like real world like texture that he does, which completely fits Middle Earth. There's the voices that they get for the elves, and they get different singers to sing kind of like the solo elf stuff. There's so much detail in this. We could talk about it forever, but there's so much detail in the score that it's almost like its own movie. You could actually go through and figure out why he did everything. Like he went on his own journey of Middle Earth, and it's awesome. There's so many cool things.
You talk about like the Isengard theme, like just bring that back to my head. It's just so the percussiveness of it. It so reminds me of like John Bonham, of just this larger than life percussive sound.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Actually, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, bum, bum. It's so like they just got so much like it's like falling forward. It's industrial. Yeah.
I love that you specifically call it the Isengard theme, because I do think that a lot of the music changes based on the geography, which I think they do that a little bit in the original Star Wars trilogy, but we were living through the prequels, and I don't feel like that John Williams does that with the prequels as much. In a few rare exceptions, but like in Lord of the Rings, you have the Shire, you have Isengard, you have the Rohan is one of the most beautiful themes in the entire trilogy.
I love the Rohan one.
And jumping back to one of my favorite moments of Boromir talking about the White Tower, you hear, and I love the payoff for this, you hear very briefly the Minas Tirith theme there, and it doesn't show up again until Gandalf and Pippin are riding through Gondor, and they come up to, and you can see Minas Tirith over the hills, and it's like, there it is. And that theme just blares out for the next like 5 minutes in all its glory. And it's like, this is what Boromir was, this is what was going on in his head the whole time. The majesty of this city. And it's such a perfect payoff after hours of the beautiful Rohan music.
Totally agree. He definitely has a lot of areas. We didn't even mention the ring, that's the siren song, and also the Fellowship theme. Dun, 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 dun. Like that whole thing is like, that's all over Fellowship of the Ring, and it's kind of subtly brought back throughout the other two movies when they think about teamwork, basically.
When they're all gathering around Frodo's bed at the end. He just like suddenly goes back in.
Yep.
I love that moment too, because as an audience member, you're just like, oh, that's nice. But then when you really think about it, it's like, oh yeah, this entire time Frodo never knew that Gandalf survived. Like
Gandalf?
like of course, and we're just sitting here like, oh, well, of course Gandalf survived. What kind of movie would this be? It's like, nope. And honestly, like after the last several years of dealing with fantasy like Game of Thrones, where every season we're looking for who's the next character that's going to get bumped off, it's really nice to go back to Lord of the Rings and get to the ending and have the majority of the main characters survive.
Yeah, none
of the like good. You guess you can kind of say Boromir's like kind of a good guy, but he was like a flawed good guy. But really, other than that, it's like all villains that die in it.
Yeah,
and all we see now.
I also think that's why they kind of shoehorn, and it works, but they kind of shoehorn in some characters into Two Towers and Return of the King so that they can have a good character die, like Haldir in the Two Towers. It's like the elves never come to Helm's Deep, but you gotta kill off a good character every now and then. Because I think Theoden then is the only other major character
Yeah, Theoden is
to die.
He doesn't even have anything to worry about because now he's going back to his forefathers, of which he will no longer feel ashamed. So he's fine.
Yeah.
I do want to give a quick shout out because I missed it earlier. We were talking about characters. I do want to give a quick shout out to Eowyn because even though there's a lot of badass women in fantasy now, there was definitely not at that time. So I remember.
I have to say, her moment
and just being like, yes, finally.
Yeah, her the big moment against the Witch King. I am no man. I remember the response in the theater when I saw it, and I certainly heard a lot of voices behind me that all just cheered out in that moment. And I remember just thinking, that's cool. Like the only other thing I've seen that I would like compare that to as far as like, oh wow, I'm in a theater with a lot of women who are getting to experience this super powerful moment was when I saw Mad Max Fury Road, of just the awesomeness of Furiosa.
Yeah, that's another moment in the movies. I wish they had the speech from the book, but I get it. It's a big wordy speech, and in a movie, you'd probably be looking at that saying, okay, how's she not been killed yet? Well, she's just sitting there. She's sitting there. What do they call it in The Incredibles? Monologuing. You can't always get away with that in film, but you can in books. But yeah, that is just an awesome, awesome moment. And honestly, I think also for me, this trilogy was probably one of the first experiences I had where you did get audiences cheering.
Yeah.
In the theater. That wasn't a thing that I experienced.
Yeah.
I think the first one I remember was when Aragorn decapitates. I think it's Lurs, the Uruk-hai at the end of Fellowship. That was like one of the first times I ever heard cheering in a movie theater.
Yeah, the moment when the elves come to help in Helm's Deep when they arrive, that got a huge cheer. I remember that.
And I think in Two Towers and Return of the King, anytime Legolas does anything cool, that would always get a cheer. Like nowadays, you go to a big movie and that's just like standard. Like, oh, cool, there's Hulk, yeah. It's like, but yeah, no, like that didn't happen in the Star Wars prequels. We were all too disappointed. Now it's like it's a thing now.
The only movies I can remember a big audience reactions to before Lord of the Rings was like seeing Independence Day in the theater and maybe like Jurassic Park.
I saw both of those at a drive-in, so didn't quite get that effect. We talked a little bit about the theatrical versus the extended editions. So it's clear based on the conversations we've had already, we are clearly in the extended camp.
Absolutely, man.
Those are the only versions.
How could you not be?
Yeah, extended all the way. It's even for first viewing.
At this point, because I got lucky. Like they finally started packing in, at least for the 4K releases. They're like, we're going to put them both in one package. And I was like, that's nice. If you hadn't, I would have just bought the extendeds. Because
what are you going to do with the other ones? Like ever?
Like literally, the only thing I think of is like if you're introducing someone to them and they're like, I've only got 7 hours. It's like, okay, fine. I guess we're going to have to watch the theatricals then.
Look,
I guess you're only watching the first two. You'll have to come back later.
I have exactly 2 hours and 48 minutes. I can't go a second longer. All right,
fine. No, you've got to. They add so much to, and it's not even just the big stuff. There's so many little sequences that you wonder, like, why would you cut that? It adds so much depth to the character. Yes.
Gimli's gift.
Yes. There's almost a there's no drop off in quality. I mean, I might say like the there's a few that have a little bit of drop off, but they don't feel shoehorned in there. Like I almost don't even remember what's extended and theatrical anymore.
Well, that was the thing with so many like director's cuts where you could like the editors exist for a reason, because you can't trust a director to generally put out the best quality of something. And if you, a lot of director's cuts, if you watch them and you know what scenes were added back in, you can go, I see why this is cut. This doesn't add anything, or this makes no sense. But again, with the extended edition, you're going, I guess this was only cut to make the studio happy with the runtime of the theatrical release, because this just adds to the movie. This just makes the story better and more complete.
And like they came back, Howard Shore came back and scored it all. Like the movie, he'd already won the award. He didn't have to do that.
There are moments too when we watch the extended edition. I don't know how my brain does this, but I remember way too much of what was added back in. But when I watched the stuff that was added back then, it's like, this cut actually flows better somehow. It's like, okay, awesome.
I think there is a real like part of the appeal of Lord of the Rings is the time that you invest into it. So therefore it's perfectly natural to have the extended versions. Like when that ring goes in the lava, if you spent 13 hours, that's better than if you spent 10 hours getting it there. I mean, it's just the nature of the story.
That's a great point, like, because this is a fantasy epic. It's known for being 3 books, this huge long story. Like you're expecting to invest time, like you're saying there, and also I think it further encapsulates just how far it is to get to Mount Doom. Like I couldn't agree with you more, Miles. The longer it takes Frodo and Sam to get there, the more drained I am by the end. And I enjoy that more because you're tired. You went on this journey too.
Yep.
I do think it's really funny that if you look at the books, you look at the page count of the books get shorter as you go further along.
The movies get longer.
But the movies get longer.
Yeah.
And I know that has a lot of with how they had to like reorganize, because as Miles was saying earlier, like the Two Towers, like a lot of the Two Towers, the book ends up in Return of the King, the movie. Like it's weird, but they made it work. Probably the one cut in the extended version that I kind of go back and forth on because it sort of changes sort of how the story works is actually the confrontation with Saruman in Return of the King. Because if you just go by the books, you're like, well, yeah, Saruman doesn't die at Orthanc. He, goes on and takes over the Shire, and that's how how you get to the ending of Return of the King. And it's like, so technically him not dying is more book accurate, but then like they don't have the Scouring of the Shire, so it's like, you got to kill him. You got to do it. You got to kill him there. Plus, it's probably Christopher Lee's best speeches are in the Return of the King, anyways.
Yeah, I really like having it there, but the one quibble I have with that scene is how can they hear each other talking? Christopher Lee is all up there. Like, how are they? Theoden's like, "You'll pay for what you did," and Christopher Lee's going like, "What?"
Wizards have super hearing.
Oh yeah,
Bluetooth.
Yeah, Gandalf and Saruman. This would have been in 2003, so they can speak in 5.1 surround sound.
Absolutely.
That's headcanon. You got it.
Yep. Well, that was an easy discussion. Extended all the way.
Oh, without question.
So how do you think the trilogy has shaped popular culture today? Not just film. I'm talking any kind of medium, because the first thing I thought of when I thought of this question was the look of the Elder Scrolls games. Like,
yeah,
that is basically the closest. Well, I guess there are a couple Lord of the Rings games. Really, the Elder Scrolls, I feel like, are the closest. I feel like living in Middle Earth in a video game.
It was a game changer on many levels. Again, as I point out, my backdrop, I'm a big Dungeons and Dragons fan. The current iteration of Dungeons and Dragons, if you look at the player's handbook in it, and you look at some of the art for some of the various races, you can see so much that was drawn from the art of the Lord of the Rings films, particularly if you go and look back at the art for some of these races in like first and second edition of D&D. There are a lot of differences, but when you get to the page for clerics in the player's handbook, you look at that class, there is a dwarven cleric, and you're like, man, this is some straight up Mines of Moria stuff right there. You're like, I recognize this dude. And there were so many different styles of art for dwarves before that, oftentimes with much more bulbous noses, rounder features, seeming much more like friendly in appearance, where you're like, no, this cleric looks like a stone badass. You're like, you tell me it's a cousin of Gimli, I believe you. So yeah, it's definitely gone in there. Funnily enough, originally D&D basically got a cease and desist from the Tolkien estate, where they had hobbits and ents in their first edition, and that's why in D&D you have halflings and tree ants, because they're like, yeah, you can't call them hobbits. And so the find the halflings line in I believe it's Two Towers is funny to us D&D fans, because we're like, oh, I wonder if that's a nod to the cease and desist from the Tolkien estate.
And I mean, it's not just D&D. It's not just our it's not just our games and our movies and our books. Lord of the Rings has got to be one of the most memed films of all time. I mean, we've all seen the One Does Not Simply.
Yep.
Like so many versions of that.
And so it begins. That's my favorite.
Yep.
Meat's back on the menu, boys.
Yep.
And when then thinking like to early internet days of like the whole potatoes song, or they're taking the Hobbits to Isengard remix. Like that's
Isengard. I forgot about that.
Those two to me are like cornerstones of early internet stuff. Like, there were no memes. You had to just email the links to these videos to people you knew, like pre-YouTube. But oh yeah, the boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
E-Bombs World and taking the Hobbits to Isengard. What did you say? That is funny.
E-Bombs World and Newgrounds. I'm very, very, very familiar.
The memes have aged so there's so many of like Lord of the Rings templates. My favorite one is the one with Gandalf standing there and he's trying to figure out which way to go in the Mines of Moria, and he's, I have no memory of this place. Like that meme is, I use that every week probably.
All right, keep your secrets.
And again, I was just been watching Archer, and they reference Lord of the Rings and Archer all the time. They constantly, there's an episode where they ask if Lana is an Ent because she has giant hands. And and then they'll just bring up Entmoot.
You mentioned the one cannot simply meme with Boromir talking at the Council of Elrond. He is not saying that during that picture when he's doing that. In that picture, he's talking about the great eye, a great eye. But it fits so well that it's become the thing. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
Also, another thing heavily memed, and my bow and my axe.
Yeah. Or how about side by side with a friend?
Yep.
I feel honestly like
that still counts as one. Which I maintain it does still count as one. I maintain that.
I feel honestly that I feel like the Lord of the Rings movies coming out was like the beginning of the more mainstreaming of fantasy. I feel like before Lord of the Rings, it was like fantasy shows were like Xena Warrior Princess, like total B quality. Like this is just for the nerdy people. And I feel like after Lord of the Rings was when you started getting really well done. You started getting good book adaptations. We would not have had Game of Thrones without the Lord of the Rings movies. Not that ended well, but I mean, it was very popular for a while.
I would go
But
so
that
far
would
as
not have been done like without Lord of the Rings.
I'd go so far as say we wouldn't have had the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because if you look at what Marvel was willing to do with their properties for movies, they were happy to send them off wherever. Marvel Studios, they weren't planning to do anything like that, you know. Sony, sure, you can have Spider-Man, whatever. And because of, I think, seeing what someone who truly loved the source material, who had a collective group at the helm, who had so much creative control over what they were doing, was able to go, oh, wow, they made something amazing. You had other places that were going, oh, we can make something amazing as well. So I think not just from the fantasy aspect, I think having this wonderful nucleus of people who really, really cared. Like I look at the first couple seasons of The Walking Dead before their original showrunner left. I thought the show stayed decent from there, but you look at those first couple seasons, you're like, this is great. This is amazing, because you had a wonderful nucleus, and that's what happened with Marvel Studios. And I don't think that could have ever happened without the financial success of Lord of the Rings. So they went, oh, this was a nerd product made by nerds for nerds, and everyone still loved it.
And Peter Jackson too was like, again,
I was going to say that exact same. I was going to say that same. Oh, sorry. I was going to say the same thing, but that this really is the moment with which the source material, what made these nerds obsessed with source material, instead of changing it, they said something made that, and we're going to be true to that. And this is the moment they did it.
It's also the moment where you gave projects like that to auteurs like Peter Jackson. Like before Marvel Studios, I think Warner Brothers looked at Batman and said, we need to give this to someone who cares about this project and can give us a nice, at least a 3-part story. And we got that with the Dark Knight trilogy. We probably wouldn't have that without Lord of the Rings.
Not a chance.
And we wouldn't. And I said at the beginning, who would have thought Peter Jackson, director of The Frighteners, a goofy ghost comedy with Michael J. Fox, Peter Jackson's the reason we have Taika Waititi directing Thor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And James Gunn, that's you're given these big epic projects to these directors who don't necessarily have a huge blockbuster under their belt, but have a clear creative vision and a love for what they're doing. Yeah, that is absolutely a perfect way to put it. Whew. Has there been any other film franchise since Lord of the Rings that just matches it on scope and scale? And I'm not talking about money. I'm not talking about big at the box office, because you can be huge at the box office and, a few years down the road, maybe no one cares.
Marvel Studios is the only thing I will compare. And the reason I'll give it the comparison is I remember when the first footage for Iron Man from Comic-Con came out, and that very fuzzy video hit the internet. And I remember losing my mind, but also thinking, who's going to care about Iron Man? Iron Man was a B-list hero at best when that movie came out. And so again, with Lord of the Rings, I had heard of these books, but even me, big nerd, I hadn't read them. So I was going, who's going to see this? Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor were not the big A-list Marvel heroes. That was Spider-Man and the X-Men. That's who people knew. And yet we had the Avengers become this huge thing. So I would say Iron Man leading up to that first Avengers movie, that's what I would compare to Lord of the Rings. Because you had a film studio that could not afford to stumble anywhere along there, because they were going on their own. And if one of those movies had tanked, I don't know that they'd have been able to keep making them. That's the closest I can come up with for what I would compare in terms of how the hell did they pull this off? I'd
have to agree with you 100%, because you're right. If any one of those movies, I'd say in the early days, I think they can afford to have one movie stumble at this point.
Now
and
they can, yeah.
And now they can recover. But literally, like just a few weeks ago, I finished a rewatch of the Infinity Saga, and watching the Lord of the Rings right after that's like, man, seeing the Rohirrim show up at the end of the Battle of Gondor is literally the same thing as seeing all the Avengers resurrected coming through the portals.
Yeah.
It's like they, special effects have improved. Avengers looks better, blah, blah, blah. It's a longer story. It's still the same thing. And again, they're all fighting over jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the same. I think I commented earlier, but you have to have the source material be great, and then you have to hit a whole separate lightning strike, have the interpretation be great. It's two things, and that's very difficult to do. I can't think of anything besides Marvel that has done it the way Lord of the Rings did.
Yeah, and shout out to casting directors in both of those, because again, looking at all the unknowns that were in Lord of the Rings, and looking at again, Sala from Indiana Jones is playing your big dwarven character, and yeah, like, okay, we're gonna have Mikey from Goonies is gonna be one of our main characters. Like, I love Goonies, I love Sean Astin, but how many people instantly thought Rudy? That's who we need. That's our guy. Like, some of those casting decisions, if you really think about who those people were when that came out, you're going, this is bonkers. What studio would go, yeah, here's your giant sack of money, go ahead, do this. A bunch of no names, Rudy and Agent Smith, you got this.
Yeah,
I think Sean Astin lobbied pretty hard for that role. From what
I read, he did.
Like, he really lobbied for it.
Yeah. And what the other MVP of the movie is New Zealand itself. I mean, I can honestly say I didn't know what New Zealand. I had, besides playing the game of Risk, I had no idea what New Zealand looked like.
Do you think that was advantageous for the film as well too? Because with all of us not knowing what it looked like, and this is supposed to be Middle Earth, so it's not supposed to be Earth, a place that we're so unfamiliar with, it could feel like a fantasy world.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Because you know what, they could have filmed all the stuff crossing the Misty Mountains. They could have filmed that at the Rockies, but we'd have been like, yeah, that's America.
Yeah.
That's we live just west of there.
Yeah, I can tell by the Taco Bell in the background.
I will say regarding cash, sometimes you also get lucky, not with just who you get, but who you don't get, because I failed to mention this before, but who else here knows who was originally set to play who they wanted for Gandalf?
Was that? Did I hear? Was that Connery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I want to say, wasn't it that he wouldn't do it because of how long the shoot was?
He wouldn't do it because he didn't understand the material.
That's what it was. Okay, I knew there was a reason he turned it down.
Yeah, he turned it down. He said, I don't understand the material, and then made League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
And then retired.
Yeah. So yeah, we got really lucky with that particular no.
No, you're not wrong.
And we got lucky with Vigo,
So I want to say, I heard when he got offered the gig, he talked to his son about it, because he would always run his projects by his kid, because he'd be, away filming. And he's like, hey, I got offered this thing, but I'm gonna be gone for like a year and a half filming. It's like Lord of the Rings. And his kid was super into Lord of the Rings. He's like, oh, Dad, what character? It's like, the character's name's like Aragorn. Apparently his son was like, you have to take this gig. You have to. He's the king. He's amazing. And so then Vigo's going, I guess I'm taking this job then. Okay, thank you.
I know, it's crazy. I was reading that, and it's funny to think that was his 11-year-old son that told him to take the role. And
yeah,
he would be like probably 33 or 34 now.
Yep.
MVP.
Kind of a weird thought.
Yeah. Well, that's how Kate Blanchett. That's why Kate Blanchett did Thor Ragnarok. Was her kids were like, we love Marvel. You have to do this.
Probably everybody's doing Marvel now. Their kids are like, please do Marvel.
Yeah.
I mean, I got my call. You guys get your calls too, right?
Oh yeah.
Kate Blanchett didn't want to do it for like $12 million. You had to have the kid tell her to do it.
Like, right. The giant sack of money didn't help at all.
I unfortunately, as we all know, lost out to Benedict Cumberbatch for Doctor Strange, but I still have I still have a shot at Reed Richards.
I've been lobbying you for both roles. Lobbying at you for both.
We all know it's going to be John Krasinski. It's all good.
I mean, yeah.
All right. Let's talk about that other trilogy that did very well at the box office, but
The Dark Knight.
No, I'm talking about a trilogy that I'd say most people would rather forget. I say most people. I know there are fans out there, but oh boy, when The Hobbit dropped and they ended up saying we're going to make it 3 films, I was immediately skeptical.
Okay, look.
Rightfully so.
Okay, look.
We're gonna take a 300-page book and make 3 movies out of it.
It's shorter than any of the trilogy books, and they wanted to stretch it out more. I'll save my rant in a minute. I have my brief rant of why these. I didn't mean to cut you off, Ben. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's good. It's good.
Okay.
I don't even remember. I can't remember what I was about to say.
Just going into this trilogy. I guess since I already interrupted, I was just talking with my partner earlier about this. To me, the whole reason why those movies don't work, it's more so than stretching it out with all this just minutia that didn't need to be there and wasn't in the books to begin with. I think the biggest problem with it was you had some of the same actors from Lord of the Rings and a lot of the same settings, but you had things like physics behaving differently. I specifically think of when the dwarves come to Bag End and they do the "That's What Bilbo Baggins Hates" song. I love The Hobbit. I love that book. I should have loved this moment, but the way our dwarves looked were so inconsistent, not just from one another, but how we saw Gimli look and the way we see them balancing the plates and the bowls and all that. It's cartoon level physics. Both that and with the way like Bomber's body behaved, nothing behaved that way. And for me, that's kind of what wrecked it, was just the inconsistency.
I haven't even seen them all, so
you and me both. I saw the first one. I walked out just shaking my head, and I couldn't come back for either of the other two. I couldn't do it.
Ooh, I like
the third one was super painful.
Was it?
It was. It was really bad.
Like I liked parts of the first one. I was like, well, I'll give it a chance. I liked some parts of the second one, but the third one was just painful. I feel like my main takeaway of The Hobbit was that I wish Evangeline Lilly could have played Arwen. She was a way better elf than Tyler, but
I take that.
What I find funny about that is, her character was added specifically for the movies,
yeah,
and she stole the scenes from Legolas.
Well, she's an awesome actress, but
yeah,
glad she got in the Marvel universe.
I will address your complaints about physics here, Bjorn, by saying that you get to the third movie and you get to see some crazy scenes where Legolas is basically Mario.
That's what I heard. Like,
so,
and do you know what my favorite scenes with Legolas in the book were?
Do tell.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Miles.
Hey, speaking of, we were just talking about casting and luck and all that kind of stuff. And you know what? Vigo actually got a call to be in The Hobbit. And he said, Aragorn's not in the books.
Thank you,
no.
Vigo. Thank you, Vigo. The one thing I will say, though, from those movies was the casting of Bilbo was amazing.
I do, yeah. I do.
Yes.
I'm sorry. The one thing I will say, the riddles in the dark scene is perfectly done. That is the only thing I will give that first one. Riddles in the Dark was perfect. That was my introduction to The Hobbit. I think I was in third grade, and this book of like little sections from all sorts of pieces of literature. Riddles in the Dark was one of the sections in there. And I remember thinking, what is this? What is this? And I just so happened it was my girlfriend in high school bought me a copy of The Hobbit for my birthday, saying, I think you would like this book. And I got to Riddles in the Dark and just went, this is it. This was my favorite thing from elementary school. So that scene's like really, really special to me. And so seeing it on screen perfectly performed thrilled me. And between reading it and that, I had seen the Rankin Bass, which is I also think wonderful, but no, Freeman and Circus, perfection.
Yep.
And what was with the weird like fight scene with Saruman and all, like where they had to basically CG like him? I mean, because Christopher Lee was like too old to do more than sit, so it was like so clearly like not him. And I don't think that was in the book either. So
no, Saruman's not in Hobbit.
No, I mean I wouldn't be surprised if if in the appendices it's like, yes, Saruman and Gandalf and Galadriel all went to, the edge of Mirkwood to find out what the heck was going on. But it's like, that doesn't like matter to the story of The Hobbit. It just matters to setting up the Lord of the Rings. And The Hobbit, the only thing that The Hobbit should be setting up for the Lord of the Rings is the ring.
Yeah, I mean,
that's all that matters.
There's just so much stuff crammed in there. Like you've got you got Radagast, you got Bird Poop the Brown. He's not in. He's not in that book either. I'm like, why do I have this nincompoop on my screen?
Yep, I had a feeling this discussion was going to go this way. If there's two things we agree on, it's the extended editions are the way to go, and The Hobbit is not the way to go.
No. If you need a film version, just watch the Rankin Bass. It'll be fun.
I think somebody like cut a version of The Hobbit, because I feel like Dustin got it somehow, and we watched part of it. Somebody actually did like edit a version of The Hobbit that was like just the stuff in the book.
Well, I think the real problem we ran into, it's like, when Peter Jackson made Lord of the Rings, again, this was a labor of love. And granted, I'm sure the sacks of money that followed didn't upset him at all, nor should they. I'm all about artists getting paid. But he didn't want to do those movies. That was supposed to be Guillermo del Toro, and
I'd like to see his version.
I would too. I think it probably would have been good as opposed to what we got. So you had somebody who was given someone else's project, someone else's script. I mean, it's on a much smaller scale. I've been involved with productions where somebody along the level, be it a director, a designer, whatever, has had to drop out and someone else is just shoehorned in. They're like, here, put it up. And those shows haven't been anywhere near as good as they would have been with the person who was initially passionate about it. You basically had somebody who they went, hey, you made Lord of the Rings and it was great. Here's a big sack of money. Go finish this thing. And I think it showed in the final product that his heart wasn't in it.
I will say this though, Guillermo del Toro left, and for that we got Pacific Rim, and I'm forever grateful.
Yeah, we did.
For that. All right, it's about time to start wrapping things up. So I want to get everyone's final thoughts. Sarah, Lord of the Rings, what are your final thoughts to say on this majestic trilogy?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of thoughts about it. But I feel like I guess being a lover of books and a voracious reader of books, I am really happy that trilogy convinced people to be more true to the source material. Even like Lord of the Rings, you don't have to keep everything 100% the same, but be true to it. Don't just throw the source material out the window, which is pretty much what was happening most of the time before that. So I'm really appreciative and I'm appreciative that it gave us I feel like it's given us a lot of the serialized TV shows that are coming out that are based on books and really they don't all work out, but most of them, at least when they're following the source material, worked out. As we learned with Game of Thrones, once they ran out of the source material, it went down the crapper. But when they had the source material, they were doing a great job. So stick with that source material. Thank you, Lord of the Rings.
Miles, what are your final thoughts for this episode?
Well, The Lord of the Rings means a lot to me. It is one of the things that resonates with me deeply, that there is some green and good in this world and that it's worth fighting for, and that the need for power, the ambition for ambition's sake, is so easily exploited by evil. And the lesson you take from this is just that if there's pure evil, then it's easy to exploit our base nature, and we have to fight to be good. And the way that they took 14 hours to drive that home is fantastic. This is a modern miracle that these movies exist this way. It truly is. Like, they took that theme and that core, like Sarah said, they took the spirit of it and made it into this sprawling trilogy, and you can watch the whole thing without ever being like, wait, where are we? It truly is amazing. I'm grateful that this exists. That's my thought, Ben. I'm just grateful that this exists in the world.
All right, Bjorn, take us home.
For me, it comes from a standpoint of what I truly love in film, and that is things that are physical, things that are practical. I love practical effects more than anything else. And yes, there was some great CG in this, but I think of movies like Jurassic Park, like Terminator 2, things that so much of it was practical, and that's what made it great. Amongst these moments of CG, we talked about Weta Workshop, all the armor that was built, all the blades that were built for those fights, the fact that you had steel on steel in these incredibly well choreographed fights. And for me, being a huge lover of theatrical combat, seeing that, I think that has helped propel that forward. So we got things like Game of Thrones, which has a bunch of great sword fights in it. The Witcher, which again also has a bunch of great sword fights. So me, as a big lover of stage combat, seeing that helps keep that alive, keeps the need for that there. And a little thing I'll add: go back and watch Fellowship of the Ring. When Boromir is teaching the hobbits how to sword fight, you can hear the parry positions 2-1-5 called out. If you listen very closely, notice that when I saw the movie, because they're doing positions 2-1-5 from the Society of American Fight Directors stage combat. So little thing you can see in that. I love sword fights, and combat's important. And I think Lord of the Rings did help keep that relevant, where it's like, oh, people want practical effects, they want live steel, and they want wonderful fights on screen.
Well, I can't add too much of that because I think Miles took my thought and perfected it. It's a miracle. These are a modern miracle of cinema. And it's absolutely right. And here we are 20 years later from the release of the first film. These still hold up. And there has been nothing in cinema in the fantasy genre. We'll give Marvel their corner of the world there, but nothing in the fantasy genre for me has lived up to the bar that has been set by these three films. And we're kind of, I think we're overdue, because the generation before us, they had Star Wars. 24 years later, we got Lord of the Rings. We're 20 years out from Lord of the Rings now. We're due for the next big cinematic event that will define, the coming decades of genre filmmaking. So, if you're a director out there and you love your craft and you have something you really want to do that you love so much, pitch it to your studio. This is the time. We are due, and we're ready for it. All right.
Okay.
No, go ahead, because we're about to go on to trivia.
Oh,
yeah, anything else to say? Say it now.
Theoretically, this source material somewhere exists, because the common denominator between Marvel and between Star Wars and between Lord of the Rings is that somebody made this up first, and then interpreted it. So Let's do it.
All right, here we are. The first trivia of 2022. Now, for those of you out there who were wondering, wait, who the heck won trivia in 2021? Well, because we, kind of cut the show early that year, I'm rolling over the scores. So let me just read them off real quick so we can remind everyone where we're at. Right now, Sarah is tied for first with Jalen and Travis at 3. Daniel, Chap, and Andrea are all tied for second at 1. Catherine, Frank, and Larice are not on the board yet. Let's see if we can get Miles and Bjorn on the board. And Sarah, let's see if we can get you out there in first place.
There are no negative points, right? That's what I want to make sure I don't.
There are no negative points.
All right. So.
All right.
I don't have to worry about falling behind.
Good.
So, this week's trivia question is: which of the following actors that make up the Fellowship is the shortest? Is it Sean Bean, Viggo Mortensen, John Rhys Davies, or Orlando Bloom? I'm going to go clockwise. So on my screen, Bjorn, that would be you first.
I don't think Viggo is very tall. I'm going to say Viggo.
All right. Miles.
Say Orlando Bloom.
All right, Sarah.
I have no idea. I will also go with Orlando Bloom. I know it's not John Rhys Davies.
No, it's not. He's tall.
He's tall, yeah.
All right. So, first trivia of 2022. 1 for Viggo, 2 for Orlando Bloom. Well, unfortunately, no one gets any points this week.
Sean.
It's Sean Bean.
Oh.
And no one was fooled by the trick. We all know that John Rhys Davies is actually the tallest actor among the Fellowship. Not the tallest actor in the trilogy, though. That honor goes to Christopher Lee. But yeah, Sean, and they're all fairly close.
I mean, when you're larger than life, obviously you're going to be the tallest in the film.
Sean Bean is 5'10" and a half. He is just shorter than Viggo and Orlando, who are both 5'11".
Okay, so it's not like crazy.
It's not crazy, but they are. And John Rhys Davies, of course, 6'1". Yeah, I definitely
couldn't shorter than me. Dang.
Well, he's still taller than most of the actors who played Hobbits.
It's true. I think they're the only people in those films that might be taller than. That's about it.
All right. Well, that is a wrap for the Sunday Matinee, episode 33. I do have a couple of episodes planned coming up, including the Spider-Man No Way Home spoiler cast, which, if you haven't seen that movie, please don't watch that episode because we're going to go all out with, there's a lot to be said about that movie. That's all I'll say.
I've been working hard to avoid spoilers about that movie.
And I will not say anything now. So, but that's it for tonight. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Miles. Thank you, Bjorn. I'm Ben Stahl. It's been the Sunday Matinee. Enjoy films. Get your vaccinations if you haven't already. And have an excellent day, everybody.
Cheers.